Okay, this is on, right? Find your name card over here. And as we're setting up our panel for the next session, I'm going to do a little introduction here of the next two sessions and the process and the fun we're going to be having. This is what we call two sessions of what we're going to call lightning rounds. So I'm going to give some instructions to my panelists also. Oh, Steve, come on up. So for this session and the next one, we have panelists, and they are tasked with sharing with us examples. This first panel is companies in higher education, and while we've heard a lot this morning and early this afternoon on a lot of the theory and research and what's in the ideal world of what we could be doing for adaptability, we all know that we have to do it in the real world. And so we've tried to assemble people who are giving it a try and going to share with us brief examples of activities that they're doing that they think is impacting adaptability in their workforce. So at first, we're going to have our panelists. They're each going to get 5 minutes. They've been prepped for that. Ken is in the back of the room, panelist. Ken, wave your hand. Okay. At about 2.5 minutes, when there's 2 minutes left, Ken will give you a high five sign. If you go much over 5 minutes, your slides or your microphone will be cut off. And we're serious about that because we're going to have some fun. Because after this part, we get into the real audience participation. We're going to ask you to pair with a partner, have some discussion. I'll ask you some questions and ask you to tell us a little bit more about what you're doing. Because while we think we've assembled in the next two sessions some really good examples, we know that there's a lot out there, and many of you were invited to attend because we think you have something to share. So we're going to get started. The panelists I have here today, I'm just going to tell you, you can read their names and their bios are in there, but we're going to start with Jim Johnson, who's the VP of Operations for S&C Electric. We have Blake Consdorf, who's the CEO and president of Felsmet USA. Okay, I'm getting it. Steve Partridge is the Vice President of Workforce Development for Northern Virginia Community College. Doug Melton, Program Director for Entrepreneurial Engineering at the Kern Foundation. And Kara Sims, Senior Behavioral and Social Scientist from RAND Corporation. So we're going to get started with Jim, and let's go.
Well, thanks for having me. So I'm a Vice President of U.S. Operations at S&C Electric Company. Well, here's our problem. In just 8 short years, 1/3 of our hourly workforce will be eligible to retire. That team is about 1,300 people strong, so consider that. Here's the other side of the equation. About that same percentage, about 1/3 of our hourly workforce has been with the company less than 5 years. We call that our short service group. And about half of all turnover company-wide comes from that hourly workforce with less than 5 years of experience. That's a big problem. Well, here's our solution. Our solution was to develop what we call our hourly career framework. Now, I'm not going to bore you with the details of the entire hourly career framework because there's a lot of tentacles to it, but I do want to capture one component of it, which is our pay for skill and flexibility program. We call this our work elements program. Now, I have handouts which are available outside if you'd like to take a look at one. But this program basically about paying and creating an hourly wage based on the skill that somebody has and the flexibility that they gain. So how does it work? We looked at all the jobs at S&C. And in this case, this is the actual brochure that we gave to folks in the assembly and test functional career path. So all the jobs that fall through assembly and test are defined in work elements. So when you see the handout, each one of these boxes is a job that we have at S&C. They're organized into 4 levels: basic, intermediate, advanced, and complex. What you might have probably already figured is skills grow as you increase in stature there. So at the basic level, all of these jobs are basic level jobs. They require basic skills. So this is how we pay for skill. Now you might have noticed, for those of you that can actually see this, there's multiple work elements at each level. So why is that? Well, We value people using their skills to grow flexibility. So we allow people to gain multiple work elements at the same horizontal skill level. Why is that important? Well, we run a manufacturing plant. I run a manufacturing plant with a number of different product lines. They're not always busy at the same time. So having the ability to move staff around allows us to stay nimble, and that's really important to us. So why is this program helpful? Well, feedback from our team members that are working through this program have told us that they value the fact that they can actually create a path for themselves now. They can see, if I come in with low-level skills, I could advance through the company and have more than just a job. They can have a career. And that helps with our retention. So that problem around people with less than 5 years of experience leaving, well, that's how we're going to solve that. Here's how it works for S&C. You see, I told you that these are all the jobs that we have, but they're not all the jobs that we need people to move into. You know, yesterday Franz talked about recognizing industry trends. Well, a trend in our industry is that 20, 30 years ago, most of what we ship did not have any electronics in it. It's just a dumb mechanical product. Today, about half of everything that I ship has some type of intelligence built into it. And going out over the next decade, that number can grow to 70, 80, 90%. Well, what does that mean for us? Well, that means that the jobs that we have that are mostly mechanical in nature, we don't need people to fill those jobs. So we use a process called gating, which basically allows us to open up opportunities for people to advance into the jobs that we see demand for in the future. So jobs where electrical wiring, electronics, anything to do with electronics, anything to do with electrical testing, those have a lot of flexibility to grow into. And that's how we guide our people to naturally go to where the work is going to be. So it's our Work Elements program. Again, there's brochures in the back if you want to. I'm getting the sign.
Oh,
so
Ken has.
Oh, Ken has
Sure.
the brochures. If
The
you'd like
brochures
to.
are right on the table out in the hallway there.
Love
Very
to talk to you
useful,
more
thank
about
you.
it if you need to. But.
Yeah, thanks, Jim.
Yep.
We have like a minute where I can take any clarifying questions if there's something you didn't specifically understand that Jim said.
Did you learn this yourself, or did you get it from someone?
Well, the whole concept around paying for skill and flexibility is not new. But the structure and the program itself, it's homegrown. We made it up. It started about 1.5 years ago. So we launched this to our welders. So we launched it to our welders first, and we learned quite a bit. See, this program was developed so that we can take a basic welder at the time and move them up through the ranks. But we didn't really have a way of dealing with the mid-level welder who wanted to come to S&C. So we had to learn along the way. So we've adapted the program, and since we've rolled it out to now all 14 functional career paths. So this is in place for every job at S&C, from welders to machinists to the assembly folks to our food service team, to our janitorial staff, to our maintenance technicians. It covers every single hourly job.
Okay, great, thank you.
Thanks.
Next.
Yeah, so in our welders, which has been around for the longest, we actually have more welders right now than we need, which is a position I haven't been in my
Okay.
14 years with the company, 15 years with the company.
Teresa. Right.
Yeah, no problem.
No. Okay. We're going to move on to Blake. Blake, your slides are up. Do you have the controller? Go.
Very good. Thank you very much for the opportunity. Blake Consdorf, President and CEO of Felzamat USA. 5 seconds on what Felzamat does. We build and deliver machine tools, robots, and automation equipment specific to the big three. So we have a very vast array of people we need to employ. 2 things I want to share today are 2 ideas of things we've tried that I think have varying levels of success. And really, the concept of adaptability we stumbled into. We had a real problem. Where are we going to find people as we grow our company? Very difficult to interview college students. We were in my first company in Council Bluffs, Iowa. Anybody have any idea where Council Bluffs, Iowa is? Okay, perfect. It's not a thriving metropolis like Chicago, so we had to recruit talent. And we were very successful. And Sandy, I think I know where we took all the Minnesota people from you, because there's a robotics program in central Minnesota.
We're going to take some of them back.
Yeah, well, I think you did, and that's exactly what brings me to the point. we could get these kids to come work for us, we'd put value into them, and then they'd leave to go home to their families, get married, have kids. So we were constantly in this cycle of not retaining talent. So the first thing we did is we partnered with a local community college, and I'll go through an example there. And the other thing you can do is there's organizations in every city that have funds. You just got to go look for them. STEM programs, Project Lead the Way. A lot of these programs will help you attract talent. So what do? You make a commercial. I'm just kidding. That was actually the outcome after we put the program in place, and we did that to raise awareness. Getting the kids excited was one aspect, but you got to get the parents excited too. The good part about the program, and it's too little, the text is too small to read, but we took the classroom to our shop floor. So we combined both the educational pieces, the concepts, but then translated into real-world, hands-on applications. And because we could control it, we could do different things, and this is where the adaptability piece comes in. So one of the projects we had is we had these kids engineer a solution, and then they'd have to build their solution. But we took some prints away, we took some parts away, we challenged them, and some kind of shut down, and then you have to coach them in how to deal with those things, but others would use the resources available to them, and they would adapt. And then at the end of the semester, we would hire the 2 or 3 best students in that class. Now we were really building something. And these kids are 2-year degree students, not 4-year. So they have a jump start in their career and the value they bring to the company. And some of the first ones we hired turned into the best engineers, programmers, and managers in the company. Oh, by the way, a career in manufacturing also is very lucrative for the individual. Hundreds of thousands of jobs are unfilled in manufacturing today, and it's only going to get worse with the retiring baby boomers. So the opportunities are huge if we can get these kids engaged. The other thing we're doing is we started a partnership with an apprenticeship program. Again, adaptability. Bring these kids in. Maybe they're an apprentice to be a machinist. Let's have them do assembly. Let's have them do electrical. Let's have them program a robot. All of a sudden, they've got all these other skills that they can utilize to make their value bigger for their companies. And it doesn't start at colleges. I'm a firm believer you got to start before that. Get to the high schools. Put internships in place. Get these kids excited about the future that they have. Again, lots of programs out there with funding that can help you do this. They can help you with advertising. They can help you get that word out on the street. It's not a one and done approach. It's a constant effort, and it takes not just the educational system. It takes the employers making a concerted effort to do it. Advertising, how do you reach those parents? How do you get that word out there that adaptability is a huge part of the future? Manufacturing, obviously I'm near and dear to, it continues to be a dirty word. We got to change that mentality. This is the highest technologies in the world are being used in manufacturing. And lastly, what about a Felsamat University? What an idea if we could teach kids that not only we hire, but our customers hire.
Money moves.
Amen. Thank you.
Thank you, Blake.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any question for clarification, real quick? Kirsty.
I just have one. You indicated that you hire the 2 top students. You indicated that you hire the top 2 students out of the class. Are the other kids offered opportunities in the community as well with manufacturers?
Absolutely, and that's again part of the strategy here is we were selfish in wanting to grow our own company, but the people that use our equipment need the same skills. The operators, the level of complexity of machinery and automation continues to rise. If we install a piece of equipment that they can't maintain and operate, guess who they're calling? And I don't have enough people to begin with. So absolutely, that's the other part of the strategy.
Great, thank you.
Thanks. Okay, Steve, talk to us about what's going on at the community college.
Well, there's lots going on. That was a nice lead-in saying that you partner with the community college, so thank you. But we see all too often we hear from businesses, and it's a kind of a single company approach. And it works for a company, but it's a lot of effort and time on their part to sort of research and find out how to go about this. And we don't take a real systemic view of workforce development in our country. We sort of have pockets of excellence, and then we hope they'll scale eventually. And I just got back, I apologize, my voice is scratchy. I was in Germany last week touring their apprenticeship system. because they are obviously seen as the gold standard. Everyone always says we should bring the German model here, but in reality, there's a lot of pressure on their system to be more like the American model. So 20 years ago, I think they had about only 35% of their students go to university. Now it's about 50-50 going vocational and university. Because of the globalization of their banking system, of Siemens and others, that the type of skills needed, they're saying university students are better prepared to really be critical thinkers and be more dynamic in the workplace. So my job at the college as head of workforce development is to make sure every employer who is in Northern Virginia can't say they can't find a workforce. So that keeps me very busy. We work with about 2,100 employers a year, which is a small number relative to the number of employers. But the common theme is everyone's about to retire, we don't have a workforce behind it, and kids are ill-prepared to go into the workforce. Which makes sense if you think about it. Just a generation ago, about 70% of high school students left high school having had a summer job of some sort. Now less than a third do. You look at Germany, 70% 20 years ago had work experience and left high school. Now less than 1/3 do. Now that's not that they're not busy. I have 3 boys. They seem to be busier than I am. Tutoring, after-school year-round sports, clubs, and all the people are telling you to be attractive to colleges. You got to start a nonprofit. You got to do all these things to look good on paper. But when you get to the sort of work skills, no one's talking about that. If you think about in your own community, who's in charge of career awareness? The K-12 will say, well, we have counselors and talk about getting people into college and different career tracks. But I mean, think about it. Using the German example I just saw, I met with 12-year-olds, sat down with them, and they all had to go out during their year and go get a 1-week internship. They didn't have a teacher arrange it. They didn't have a counselor set it up. They had to go on their own and find an internship, do it, and then they got critical feedback at the end, which is something we don't like in our society. We do performance reviews in companies. We don't really take them seriously a lot of times. As a manager, it's kind of like the last thing you want to do, and you just like push it off. And I think these kids get some very real-world feedback about what their strengths are, what their weaknesses are, which makes them better prepared when they're making career decisions. I have a 12-year-old also. I don't think he would be able to go out and find his own internship right now, let alone know what an internship is. But also you talk about where they get their information. If it's not the schools, it might be parents, but parents have a limited view of where the jobs are. So one of the first things I did is we launched a labor analytics group at the college. So I have people now full-time crunching data about what's happening in Northern Virginia, where the skill deficits are, what employers say they need. And they say 2 different things. They say they need people. They need the technical skills. Give us more kids that can code. Give us more things. Python, project management, data analytics. But then when you ask them to rank, we gave them 35 skill sets that we saw in job postings to give us the most important ones. Communication was number 1. Problem solving and critical thinking number 2. Relationship management was number 3. And there's an inverse relationship. We asked them at the same time is, does your company pay for training in these areas? So when you got into the coding, which was near the bottom, even though it's the number 1 hiring skill in Northern Virginia, 70-80% of the companies said they'd pay for their employee to get those skills. When you talk about the number 1 skills they hire off of, only about 5% said they would pay for those skills. So we've got this sort of schism going on with our employers of saying one thing and doing another. So we've got to really recognize that what are the skills we need to train for and get lifelong learning as part of the curriculum, because skills have a shelf life. We can train for anything. People always say, oh, America's falling behind the training. No, we can train. Our people are good. We can learn. But the question is, we really don't give good market signals about what those skills are needed. So if you think about it, if you're an employee and if your company doesn't tell you what to invest in yourself, how do you know what skills to go out and obtain? And that's a missing gap that we're trying to fill in Northern Virginia. We're working with our partners across the community to really try to create a website of where the jobs are and where the jobs are going. And what are the skills you need as an individual, working adult, or even an entry-level employee to stay competitive and stay. That way, we're not caught off guard when the skills change and our employees left behind, like the last recession. There were a lot of people out of work that had never gone back in the classrooms in 20 years. So how do we really set that mindset, and how do we as an institution push more? We're taking ownership of career awareness. So that's going to be something that's new for a college, but we're going to own that.
All right. And the bell and the buzzer has sounded. Any one clarifying question that somebody might have? Okay, we can move on to Doug Melton, who's the Program Director for Entrepreneurial Engineering at Kern Foundation. Doug?
Hopefully I can find the button. Hopefully I can add a surprise this afternoon. So I don't know if you know about Keen. Keen is a network of partner higher ed institutions that have decided to adapt their undergraduate engineering education programs in a very specific way. At the center of this effort is the idea about increasing a student's curiosity about the future and then developing their interest in economic and societal value, particularly as it connects to engineering problems. Put another way, it's engineering that puts value first, tools second. Or if you want to put it even another way, it's about putting the know-why first, supported by the know-how. So that's the nature of what these partner institutions are doing together. And it's really the network itself, the collection of these institutions that has accelerated the work. These are private public institutions all across the country. And you don't do this at an institution by adding 1 or 2 classes. Rather, each partner is transforming by expecting 100% of their engineering students to have a different perspective on what I just described. When the work is complete, their engineering programs will have a new normal. For example, when their students start a new project, they'll naturally consider the authentic demands of stakeholders, the economics of the engineering solution, sustainability, the broader societal context, unintended consequences. The point is, these will be things that are top of mind. You present a project, that's what they start thinking about. As Keen continues to grow, let me show you a snapshot. So there are 31 partner institutions, about 58,000 undergraduate engineering students, and about 3,500 engineering faculty members that are involved. If you tally this up, this is about 10% of the total undergraduate engineering enrollment and about 10% of the faculty. So about 1 in 10 people in engineering are involved somehow in this project. Now, certainly these institutions want to make a future workforce that is adaptable and prepared to experience change. But the story I have for you is different. It's really about the adaptability of the colleges of engineering as the network approaches them, as the foundation says, what do you think of these ideas? That's an interesting story. So here's the key statement. The adaptability of the future technical workforce directly depends upon the adaptability of its education. You have to get that in place. So anyone who served in the academy, I had 17 years teaching wireless and signal processing, those sorts of things. Anyone who served in a capacity like that has some thoughts about the adaptability of higher education. and you know what? We will chuckle about this and we might shrug our shoulders, but that's not acceptable. We have to change what we're doing, and these institutions are taking it into a contextual. So I'll put up the collection of institutions here. Let's see if. So each logo represents, I got to tell you one quote that I love. Klaus Schwab, German engineer and founder of the World Economic Forum, observed, "In the new world, it's not the big fish which eats the small fish. It's the fast fish which eats the slow fish." Here are a bunch of fast fish. And so each logo represents a university, college, or department that has decided to rapidly evolve their educational experiences. As you might imagine, each story is unique. One thing I've learned as a program director, when people within an institution nod yes to good ideas, apple pie and motherhood, these are great ideas, but their ability to adapt very much depends on policy, very much depends on culture, and their desire to adapt. The good news is that while the adaptation goes on at different rates in all these represented institutions, they are persistent and some are absolutely amazing. So with that, I'll just say that as Keen continues to grow, adaptability is key. And we're even considering, as a foundation, how do you do a SWOT analysis on your adaptability? Thank you.
Powerful.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any clarifying question from the audience? Something you didn't understand? This is very interesting. Okay, so our last panelist here is Kara Sims from RAND Corporation.
And the button. I have a little bit of an advantage in the sense that Susan and Tracy have laid some of the groundwork for me, which is good because I only have 5 minutes. So I'm speaking about a 10-day course put on by the Army to enhance leader adaptability. They wanted to emphasize several things with this course. They wanted to enhance adaptability in leaders, enhance the perceived importance of adaptability, and develop leader ability to design training that fosters adaptability. They defined adaptability because it is the Army, based on a field manual definition. An effective change in behavior in response to an altered situation, which is pretty basic, pretty universal. The course design was based on the Polakos et al. Taxonomy of adaptive performance, with an emphasis on creative thinking, dealing with ambiguity, learning new tasks, technologies, and procedures, interpersonal adaptability, and handling stress. They had a little bit of emphasis on cultural adaptability, but not so much. And physical adaptability and handling crisis were not really addressed because they didn't have the resources to do that. It was only 25% classroom, but that classroom-based education included exploring the key concepts of adaptability and what that would look like. And then they did experiential team-based learning. AWOP also had a couple of different aspects beyond the Polakos et al. Model. They used an outcomes-based approach, basically focusing on the commander's intent. When an order is received in the Army, that can be a very procedural, paperwork-based response in terms of what's trained. In this case, in this course, they wanted to emphasize flexibility and how the tasks to achieve the ends were done. So it encouraged trainees to take initiative, adjust to the situation, and engage in critical thinking. After a training event, the guides facilitated an after-action review, also a common Army concept. But in this case, instead of 3 up, 3 down, it was more, let's think about what happened and how we can make it better, and really self-analyze and learn where we've gone. In terms of facilitators and barriers, there were numerous positive outcomes, which Susan spoke to. One of the challenges was that the training as structured was very resource intensive. You had to have units who were willing to give somebody up for 10 days and not have their position filled. You had to have a high ratio of guides to trainees. For some of the scenarios, they had actors. They had, training range, et cetera. A lot of time went into creating the structure of the course. So it's hard to sustain something like that. The most common areas of implementation after 3 months, perhaps predictably, were things that the trainees could control themselves. In terms of challenges in implementation, things that they foresaw in the course included challenges with leader buy-in, command climate, and the ability to transfer once they got back to their units. In terms of organizational change in a broader sense, from this course, you had 35 people going through maybe 4 times a year. What about more generally? Short train-the-trainer versions of AWOP were implemented elsewhere in the Army, and there is a continued currency of outcomes-based training. So there's a little bit of a shift going on in terms of what they're paying attention to and how they get there. So that's not adaptability specific per the model, but it enhances adaptability, generally speaking. And the report is also listed here.
Okay. Any specific clarifying question anybody has from the audience before we get into the fun? Okay. So now we're going to get into the opportunity for you to share with us even some ideas and opportunities. So, pick a buddy next to you. We were passing out some more note cards. For this round, I'm going to ask you, I'm going to give you a question. We're going to give you an opportunity for a few minutes to talk to a partner about answering the question, and then we're going to have a few minutes to have teams perhaps report out, who wants to share what they've talked about. But we would like you to write it down because we would like to capture that and collect those, so try and make them legible, because we want to add that to the body of knowledge from today. Okay, so find a partner next to you. You can decide to change partners. Oh, Ken?
The way this works,
Okay, everybody, we're gonna be timing you too. Okay.
the way this works is one person speaks for a minute,
All right,
and then you switch.
yeah. Did everyone hear the instructions? Okay, we got to go back to instructions. Oh, thank you,
We will ask
Michael.
you a specific question. One person in the partnership describes their answer to the other person, and then the other person, we switch after a minute, then after that minute, the other person describes their answer to you. So this is an exercise
It's a lightning round.
communications and listening. So we want you to listen to what your partner is saying, and then write down the answer to the question, and then you switch.
Mm-hmm.
So this is so you understand what your partner is saying, and your partner understands what you're saying, and then you come back to us because you now understand what your partner says, then you can share it with us.
Right. So, are we ready for the first question? All right, question 1. Do you have examples of similar programs or activities similar to what our panel has talked about? Go. Oh, it's okay. It'll ring. Yeah. Right, yeah, that's, yeah. Yeah, I'm going to ask the panel first.
Okay, switch partner, switch talking. So the person who is listening is now going to talk, and the person who was talking is now going to listen.
There's another one. Yeah. A minute's a long time. Ding. Okay, everybody. Let's put our pencils down, okay? Let's refocus our attention. Like to ask, Ken has, we have microphones, so we're going to ask for 3 or 4 volunteers to share, give us a minute of what you talked about or share an example that you have. Who's first?
Yeah. Who wants
Come
to-
on, we're not a shy group.
Okay.
Over here. Oh, got one, and then over here.
Go ahead and collect the cards as we come up.
If people could pass the cards towards the center, that'd be great.
This is great for me. Marianne obviously knows what I do, and I'm very passionate about it. But learning from Linda, at first she made the comment that it probably wasn't quite the same, but I think it is. They've taken 2 organizations and merged them together. One is a craftsman component, one is a training center, and basically talked to the community about what they need. And so they've now created these tailored training programs, give them the skills that the community manufacturers, the employers need, but especially targeting a disadvantaged group. So you're now able to reach out into an area that might not have otherwise thought it was possible for them. So I thought that was great.
Great. Okay, great. Thanks. There was
Where is that? Could,
Pittsburgh, and Bill Strickland is the person behind this, and he's taking this to other cities.
this is the Manchester prep? Okay,
Yeah.
great, thank you.
Okay, we had a hand raised over here.
We'll go over here.
So Brent is doing a comparison and connected between the work of peacetime military, because Brent was with the Army for 25 years, so he made a connection between peacetime preparation versus wartime application in the same way that K through 12 education is doing career and workforce development preparation for then actually engaging in the workforce. That there's a lot of parallels and similarities that he's defined and incorporated in NextFlex, which doesn't want to let the cat out of the bag because he's doing a speed session on it next time, but it's very insightful.
That's great, thanks. Okay, who else wants to share? Annette?
Yeah, our parallel was with community colleges that mirrored what Blake was doing, and Teresa has come out of the chemical industry where a lot of it was technician-based for mixing, and now that's robotic-based. So there's examples like Midland, Texas, that has adopted that into their community college program. I also knew of one where Train did something similar for the HVAC community in Wisconsin.
Okay. One more?
Okay, so Bernie here, my neighbor, is working with the Dallas Community College District on looking at heat mapping, very similar to what's going on at Nova, developing apprenticeships, and really helping the students look at self-awareness and how they need to adapt to the changing environment. And I just want to say that after AMP 2.0, we developed MinAmp, which is doing basically the same thing through 12 community colleges in Minnesota. And Bernie's going to talk about what I'm doing with leadership to address that change.
Okay. So in Minnesota, the focus on the deployment of your apprentice strategy in your community college system under a TAC grant with Department of Labor is to focus on the leadership adaptability, and by doing Myers-Briggs testing, emotional intelligence testing, and understanding that role. So it's great.
In what we call institutional sustainability. So we understand that as an institution, we're going to have to adapt to the changes or we're not going to be relevant anymore.
Yeah, that's really critical. One more?
Great.
So we had 3 people, not a partner, so I'll try to do both. Steve mentioned that as a basic researcher, we perhaps don't have a direct analogy to what some of the industry is doing, but as in teaching students or teaching undergraduate students or graduate students, we try to translate that basic knowledge into how does one develop a program like this. And so it is part, again, it's not maybe perhaps developing a specific program, but trying to establish the types of values and the people that would ultimately help design these types of programs that might be contributing to adaptability. And Al does work in industry with software development and noted that perhaps he doesn't have explicit programs such as this, though he just mentioned that some of the work they do partners with Keen members as well, but they try to do more multidisciplinary work and fund experiential opportunities with the hope that the byproduct, again, is not necessarily the outcome or the specific product that they create, but the value in understanding how to work in adaptable teams. So it's, again, funding experiential opportunities for their software developers.
Great. Thanks. Panel, any comments from the panel? Did you hear anything that maybe it's going to help you with your program? Anything you want to share? All right. We're going to go on to question 2, so you can keep the same.
Before you do that,
yeah?
let me collect any other cards for this particular question that you have, so we keep the issues
So you
separate.
can keep your same partner, or if you want to find a new neighbor, that's your call. Okay, so Ken, you ready with the timer? Okay, so for the next question, I want you to think about what our panelists has shared with you today, and you shared with us some of the examples that you've heard that were similar, and talk to each other about what was your key takeaway from this this particular session and the examples that you've heard so far. What are you going to take away from this? First minute, go.
Okay. Switch speakers. Okay, write down those answers.
All right. Is time up, Ken? Okay, let's listen up. We want it now. The sharing part is back again. So we want to hear from a few more people. Share what you and your partner are taking away and taking back to maybe try and use at home. Who's first? This is not a shy group.
Somebody in the back of the room? We used the front of the room before.
Oh, we got Brent. We know Brent will share.
Okay, you're on.
Let's not be shy.
Thank you. So we're going to kind of switch this around. I'm going to tell you what my answer was, and she's going to tell you what hers is because we're kind of slow.
That's fine.
Yeah.
She can't read your handwriting, right?
We're adapting to our own skills. My takeaway on it was that flexibility and adaptability are really a way of achieving diversity, and that a healthy innovation ecosystem requires diverse inputs. And so flexibility and adaptability is equal to diversity.
Great.
And my key takeaway was from things that Blake had said, and the experience of, you know, creating excitement around sort of the technical area, and then drawing among the local community colleges to and creating sort of a competition around it, and then, you know, giving them a challenge, and then getting them uncomfortable with the challenge, so you can see how people react not only with their technical skills but also sort of that emotional intelligence, and then eventually hiring the top 2 candidates. And I'm from the Manufacturing USA, one of the institutes, and I think that's something that we can instill in some of the institutes with the workforce development, and trying to get them excited about some of these topics like sensors and controls and sustainable manufacturing and process intensification, and help build out these new industries.
Thanks. Okay, there was a couple up here.
Great.
And then.
So I was here next to Drew, and he's with the Boy Scouts, and he said what he got out of it was the questions about how do you learn over time to measure your outcomes and on adaptability, and then in terms of that effectiveness, making sure that you, within the Boy Scouts in particular, how do they do when they do the merit badge programs, for example? How is what they're doing in the merit badge programs actually being effective at something beyond the little circular cloth badge? You know, how do they go through that? So it was really good. And having been a multi-generational Boy Scout family, I really like that. So thank you, Drew.
So one of the things that David mentioned that is a takeaway for him is there's 3 terms that have been used frequently. One is adaptability, obviously, but the other is sustainability and durability. So really thinking about these 3 terms, not just in the context of this workshop, but how he might apply them in the context of his own research. And then also as it relates to what his role is as the provost in using that terminology and those concepts to advance within the programs in the institution.
Great.
I'll do Anne's comments because they were really
good.
They were great. So Anne was really taken by the discussions around culture and empathy and curiosity and the mindset discussions, and the change that we're seeing to be more people-oriented, where we're looking more at mindset, not just skill set. And she thinks that line of reasoning and action has the potential to be transformative, certainly in higher education.
Yeah, that's very good. Okay, anyone else want to share? Good.
Johnny and I think had similar viewpoint on the takeaway, and I think it also goes to Blake, is the emphasis on communication lines between industry and educational institutions to share the needs that exist and the ones that are anticipated, and how those institutions can do a better job on equipping their students to fill those roles, and also to re-educate existing workers to be able to move up the chain, as Jim noted, and give them opportunities that go forward instead of dead-end type positions.
Great. One more? Anyone else?
We talked about 2 things. One, that about the whether or not from both Blake and Jim about, I guess the takeaway was a new question, I guess, as to what extent can we generalize from what they did to best practices in general across multiple industries, and whether or not we can translate those into making these local bottom-up changes like they're doing, right? They're not trying to make some wide sweeping government policy change. They're doing it within the unique confines of their own industries and their own businesses, frankly. So what extent can we generalize what they did to other similar businesses? And then what Steve was mentioning too about the values that organizations want versus what they'll pay for. I mean, as an educator, I teach undergraduates. I talk all the time about the technical skills, but they're going to get them anyway. So perhaps it's suggesting we need to shift how, even at that level, we're teaching the types of skills that are going to be valued when they come out. So.
That's interesting. Okay. We're going
If
to
you
collect
could please
up
pass
cards.
the cards towards the center, I'll pick them up, and
Okay.
we'll go to the last question.
And we're going to
Let
go
me know
to-
if you need any more blank cards.
So now we're going to have some deep thought here. Question of the day, and then I'm going to ask my panelists to weigh in on this too when we get to this question here. What topics, concepts, do you think need further inquiry? So share with your partner. We're going to take 2 minutes here to think about what do we need, what needs further inquiry. What do you want to see us? What do you want us, everyone, to do more research on? Go.
We're actually going to let you talk a little bit longer this time. Okay, switch speakers.
All right. All right, so now we really want to get some sharing, and this could really feed some of the future of what we may do. So who's for? Oh, we got a hand over here right away. Okay, lots of hands are going up. Start up here.
Okay.
Hi, my colleague Christine Shu for the University of Pittsburgh would like to know how do we arrange for experiential learning that emphasizes adaptability. And he had an interesting analogy for that, which is to say, listen, flying an airplane is not a good way to deal with emergencies in flight because no emergencies are supposed to happen. For that, you would need a simulator when you can simulate that, you know, the engine malfunction or there's bad weather or something like that.
Right. The thing that we talked a bunch about was we've got these sort of core lifelong skills, communication, interpersonal adaptability, and then these technical skills. How do we understand which of these are best built up in the K-12 environment, gradually built up, and which are sort of trained late, maybe even in a self-guided kind of way, which things need more support versus can be done on their own? Just learning more about those best opportunities.
Back here, we've got 3 volunteers.
So we have a 3-person group, and each one of us will give the response from another member. So to my left, the goal would be to learn more about the generalizability of adaptability theories in different domains.
Yeah, and what we discussed was that basically to develop effective measures for quantifying adaptability, you know, what are the measures that we could use from other frameworks and other theories as such, and to develop better measures to effectively quantify adaptability.
And how to possibly make the measurement systems more affordable or accessible. We talk a lot about them in meetings like this, but they're not being implemented.
Okay, well, Megan and I work for the same organization, so we had 2 heads, and we were partnered with John, who's an independent consultant. And John said that we needed to learn more about the concrete nature of skills. There were, do we have hundreds of them? Do we have thousands of them? How do we better measure them? How can we make progress without better conceptualizing skills? And we talked a lot about mayors, so.
Kathy and Megan work for and with mayors, and the question they raise is, given our really disorderly and disappointing politics in this country today.
Is he ad-libbing?
What roles can and should mayors play in leadership, in supporting community colleges, supporting local and regional workforce development, and in motivating, incentivizing employers who by and large have retreated from workforce development over the last 30 years. Many, many exceptions, but as a generalization, I think that's what the data says. How can mayors help to draw employers into more active involvement in workforce preparation? I put a lot of words in their mouth.
Very good question.
So Nikki's from the Army Research Institute, talked about the need for further inquiry into resilience. We talked a lot about adaptability, but not resilience, which is different. So in other words, once you adapt, can you persist after that change?
Great.
Anybody else up front?
one quick point. How do we share these best practices? I mean, we come to meetings like this, and we all, get some information, but where do we go for kind of detailed best practices?
Good question.
Up front,
Teresa?
our distinguished chair has the floor.
Yeah.
Well, I think in addition to the other comments, teaching organizations on really how to effectively do relevant mapping of adaptability, dimensions, and skills, and the quantifiable measurement. But then, I haven't heard anything about once you do it and you identify the gaps, putting systematic and appropriate programs in place to fill in that continuous loop. And that's where I see a lot of organizations start to break down. So I think we really need to have more conversation and learn from each other in that area.
Great. Someone else? One more, and then I'm going to ask my panel to weigh in on this.
So Christy had the important question about more research on the K-12 environment, about how to teach adaptability there in that context.
Great. So panelists, why don't we each take a minute and we'll go down the line. What's your magic wand wish?
So I'll start. So I think what we've heard about quite a bit today, and what Blake and I have been talking about, is is education and industry in sync? In some cases they are, but in many cases they're not at all levels. And perhaps in our next session we'll learn more about this. But at the lowest levels, community college, trade schools, four-year degree programs, are we really offering through those programs the things that industry needs when somebody gets out into the workforce? So that's what my takeaway is from this. Anywhere that industry can provide value and provide information back into educational resources to make sure we align better, I think there's opportunities.
The biggest thing for me, several people talked about sustainability. We talked about even a mayor's role. And with any organization, I think there's that culture word. It's that vision word. It's that clarity. It's why. Do we ever talk about why or vision or culture in the school system? And to your point, is it aligned with what we need in the workforce? I'm not smart enough to figure all that out, but I know when you explain why you're asking someone to do something, you get way better results. You can't just say be adaptive. You have to explain why. A 55-year-old iron worker, his job's going away. You need to do something different. Why? How can I help you? What's in it for him other than he doesn't have a job? So to me, there's a huge cultural vision piece that has to be aligned. As far as research goes, I'd love to know if there's any correlation between professions or degrees and levels of adaptability. Because once you know that, then you know the traits, you know the behaviors, and then you can do something about it.
That's interesting. Okay.
I'm probably going to echo what our first two panelists have said about the disconnect between business and education. It's almost like they operate independently. Most businesses don't do internships for high school students. If they do it, it's more of a recruiting tool for college students as a way to get them in, try them out. But if you think about it, what I said I learned in Germany, a week internship, job shadowing really, would be unheard of here, and the scale needed to do it. In Charlotte alone, where I came from before Northern Virginia, we had a goal in our school district to do internships for every graduating senior. That meant we needed 9,000 internships a year. And when I left a year and a half ago, we were at about 1,200. So if you talk about trying to change the cultures, you need them together to show students the opportunity of what the work looks like. Because again, they aren't working during the summer as much anymore. And they're not doing internships. So if you think about it, most college graduates are probably going to that first job is actually their first job. And those kids entering school today, 2/3 of those entering today will be in jobs that don't even exist right now. So we talk about adaptability and change. How is higher ed, how are K-12 going to prepare you for those jobs when we don't know what they are? And we're not connected with industry. So that's one of the biggest missing links. And it's not just showing up and doing donations at fundraisers or giving money to foundations or research institutions. It's really about being engaged with students. So if we could do that, I think we'd make a lot of headway on this.
Thanks.
I think there's a theme. Yesterday I happened to be at two automotive manufacturers and talking with senior engineering staff there, talking to them about their innovation chain and what they put in place. There are some remarkable changes that have happened in the last 6 months, in particularly one of those manufacturers, that increase the speed, the quantity, and the variety of innovations that are happening. And it has to do with a crowdsourcing decision that's made globally. You may know about the company I'm talking about or not. Regardless, there is a very deliberate decision within industry to increase the rate of innovation, increase the rate that they can adapt. And my wish, I forgot what it's called, what I would like to have, we've got 31 institutions that have bought in wholesale to this mission. That leaves about 390 that are working on it in their own way. Maybe they're working in concert with other network members, but there needs to be some coming together around this in a much larger way, both educationally and industry. It's basically systems thinking to solve a big problem.
Thanks. Kara?
I'll actually tag on to that a little bit. It's a multi-level problem, right? People have to be inspired, and to the extent that systems beat it out of them to not be inspired and to just follow the rules, we need to change that. Organizations need to be prepared not to beat it out of them. And then societally, we need to give people the space to be able to be creative and to change.
Great. Okay, we have a few minutes for discussion. Anyone else have any questions for the panel? Sir. Go ahead. You're first.
So this question is for Blake and Jim both, and I think it might speak to the... Okay, here we go. It might speak to the value proposition question of getting mayors engaged, right? Because money talks. So have you monetized the impact of your programs to your company, of the community college partnership, the employees you've gotten from it, the value proposition, and the benefits that you've received from your efforts of creating an adaptable employee program? Because, Jim, to have a surplus of welders is unheard of in Chicago. So, I mean, just to say that's pretty remarkable. But have you monetized the value of it and the increase in value it's provided to you?
I'll start. So we talked about this during the last question, actually. So we know what the program cost us, but that wasn't the driver for it. The driver for the program was to create a program that would benefit our team members. I think I'm at a little bit of an advantage because we're an employee-owned company who we make decisions based on the long-term investment, and it all starts with our people. So when the program was sold to our executive team and our board of directors, it wasn't about first upfront costs. It was about the long-term value and what we're going to get and what our team members get out of this program. Of course, we talked about the cost, but once you get the team into the mindset of, okay, you know what, there's value to S&C, to the company, then the cost is less of a concern. Of course, we're in business to make money, don't get me wrong. But we talked a little bit earlier about being able to take chances. And we took a chance with the program. So we launched it without knowing whether it was going to be successful or not. Had we not had that culture that supported that, we would have never started. But after we launched and we had success with the pilot, people saw that, right? Turnover numbers go down. Now, I could have spent a long time, my team could have spent a long time trying to figure out what the cost of 50% turnover at the lowest level is. And then we would have come up with a number that everybody else would have just argued about, right? We would have spent more time arguing about assumptions that we made through the calculation. So it was never for S&C about first-time cost, upfront cost.
For us, it was talked about, but it was soft cost. There was really no hardware we had to purchase, and in fact, we were able to help that local community college justify funding through grants and whatnot for robots, machine tools, et cetera. But we did invest in our people. Our people were teaching these kids. So 2 people for a full year, half their day on a Tuesday and Thursday was dedicated to teaching those kids, not working on our machines. So that's an indirect cost. But the advantage of that is we could go to that community college and we would have that summary, and we would invite the mayor, believe it or not, and we would show them the investment we just made in the college. And then that has arms and networks all over the place. So I viewed it as a cost we had no choice but to make, because the future is dependent on it.
So we studied, because Scouting's getting really engaged with the community college program because we see a direct correlation and a direct opportunity there for us. We studied in Raleigh, North Carolina, when Siemens came, how Piedmont Community College went over to Germany, studied what they needed, and developed 2-year competency and certificate programs to fit those jobs, right? Direct correlation to the local market and success. So that's an obvious sign. It was actually part of the recruitment package to get Siemens to come to North Carolina. But I would have to believe that the ongoing value proposition, it's got to be quantifiable in some way. It'd be great to have those dollars and to show the increase in productivity and as a direct bottom line benefit.
Absolutely. It all gets back down to that turnover problem we had before we even started the program. Every 2 years we were recycling these guys, and it's very easy to say, I just invested that amount of money in this guy. Now I got to start over. And oh, by the way, I got to grow. And oh, by the way, I got to make money. Yeah.
I'll add, I worked with Siemens on those projects. And it was a great story. Our job training fund paid for the equipment. It made an investment that brought in other manufacturers after the initial Siemens. You got to be careful in telling the story. Siemens loved to tell the story of how they spent $165,000 per apprentice, which to other German firms, other European firms, they're like, well, of course, it's a long-term investment. To the American firms we invited to talk about apprenticeship, it scared the hell out of them. They're like, we are not doing that. We are not quarter to quarter. That does not really return our investment. So they did the first part. It was a great give back to the community. They showed they were part of the community, but the way it was presented sometimes can make it harder to get people to come along with you.
Yeah.
There's one topic which I have not noticed discussed today, and I'm just curious. Have anybody studied effect of gender on adaptability? Can we use the adaptability programs the way to actually retain women engineers after, the 3 or 4 years they're in the company and they leave, and after they will not return for personal reasons or maybe professional reasons? And I think that's implementation of adaptability program can attract them back. And I think that will be a great value for the industry.
That's interesting, yeah. Silence. Well, we'll write that down. Did you write that down on the inquiry card?
I will say there are gendered expectations in terms of communication and other soft skills for women. So we've just been talking about how those are very important. Just want to put that out there.
Okay. On the topic of the cost of apprenticeship and return on value, the Department of Commerce about a year ago had a small study done of trying to capture the return on investment in apprenticeships in the United States. And they interviewed German companies that were here, other companies that were here who are doing either apprenticeships, whether they're registered or strong internal certificate programs. And the answer was those that are doing them are saying just what you found. It's, yeah, we know what it costs, but we know we have to do it because this is the answer. And many of them were hesitant to say that they don't want to really go out and measure that because they're not, especially if they have shareholders, they're not sure they want them to know that. And I think that's part of it. But it just seemed to be the team that did the interviews of those companies, and I was part of the review of a lot of the work. That was the theme of those companies were saying Their culture said, we know we have to do this. We know it's the right thing to do. We look at the long-term vision. If we thought short-term, we probably wouldn't be doing this because we know what it's costing us, anywhere from $50,000 to $100 and some thousand a person. But if I don't do it, I may not be here in 5 years. So that's the answer.
Well, one thing we've talked about and kicked around is like public accounting. You know, the way you look at the rules. Public trade companies have things on their books like goodwill. It's basically what their brand is worth in the marketplace. So Apple has, several $1 billion, probably more than that even, of brand awareness that they track. If you have a change in C-suite of their CEO, that can affect their share value. But talent's not really valued on the bottom line on the books. You track how much you invest in training every year on your budget. But if there was a way to quantifiably track the value of your talent of your company and quantify a number and you put it on the books that helps with your share price, that you've invested in, you've got the top people in the world on your payroll. That's one limitation of showing the value of talent, is it just not quantifiable in accounting terms sometimes.
We have time for, if they're really short, couple short questions here.
We've always heard that the German apprenticeship model is, shining beacon, and we should all, follow this. I was surprised to hear that they think that, they should be more like us. And I was curious if your attitude was changed, or if you had any thoughts on ways we should change our apprenticeship programs once you went over there to sort of make them more of a hybrid, or did you have any thoughts about? I was curious what your thoughts were.
Yeah, we did a lot of brainstorming on our buses to these small German towns to see these facilities. And one thing that's not going to change, you cannot pick up the German model and dump it here. They still they're about 50-50 if you're going vocational track versus university. In the U.S., I think whatever we do with apprenticeship, it can't be seen as lesser than, because you're making a choice as a parent to say, I want little Jimmy to go into apprenticeship versus their friends are going degree. And so most of the apprenticeship programs we've seen here in the U.S. that do partner with community colleges usually has an associate degree completion. But one of the challenges we have is the stackability and transferability of a lot of these programs. That the German model is very good. They really say it's no wrong door. Kids can go down a route and they can realize they want to go into university when they've gone to vocational track, and they take a test. And that test will get them admitted to university, and they can go back and get credit. We talked to some young kids, which very insightful, that a young woman wanted to be, she was 12, wanted to be an attorney. And he said, oh, you're going to university route. She goes, no, I'm going to clerk school. Because actually I've read that most clerks make better attorneys in the long run. So she was going the vocational track, and she knew later she wanted to switch, and it might be that she wanted to get into the workforce faster and then go to university, but it was that there was no wrong door. And that they did the education earlier on. So there wasn't a wrong choice as a parent, because many of the kids and many of their CEOs started as apprentices in Germany. So there's stigma of our program is we've marketed, it's the other college degree. No, it's not. Parents aren't stupid. They're going to say, no, that's not a college degree. And I think we have to make it that our program is the hybrid version. It does give you a college degree, but it can then lead to a bachelor's degree or a master's degree. It's not stopping. And that we're seeing on their side is they're getting pressure from their multinationals. Deutsche Bank has cut down the number of apprenticeship programs because their branch models changed. People are using apps now. So their programs they used to apprentice are going away, and the people they have in the communities have to be more a multitasking type of person with higher skill sets that deal with commercial banking needs, personal banking needs, and they're looking for university students now. So it's the market's changing, but I think we were behind the 8 ball in apprenticeship a little in saying we need to adopt their model, but actually where we are might make us better positioned to go where the whole world economy is going, to have degrees at different levels. But we as higher ed institutions have to get better at not having students lose credits every time they go down a path, and mapping their life experience and MOS from military. We've got to get better at that if we're really going to go that route.
I have a question, Doug. With the companies that you've put together, are you seeing any synergy and cost reduction in them sharing and trying to educate and move different students through a particular career path or to solve some of these problems? Are they sharing in the cost?
So you mentioned companies there. It's a collection of 31 universities.
Or universities.
And the universities, I would say there's 2 things that have happened because it's a network. The foundation could have worked with each one individually. Right? Write a check, send it. But instead, a network was created where I would say, even though it wasn't explicit, there's some dependency, there's some interdependency that has occurred, and that comes from relationship. It comes from regular meetings. The pattern of meetings and the pattern of travel and the pattern of being on each other's campus is unparalleled in my experience in higher ed. And what that has led to is an acceleration and a sharing of the work. Certainly, I think we're probably years further along simply because we have a network that's working on the ideas, not just the ideas.
Okay, well, thank you. I'd like to thank our panel and thank